Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, window shoppers of the future. I hope you're wearing your browsing shoes today because we have got another shiny new episode of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson to impress you. And here with the specials board all laid out in digital chalk, it's the Spruiker with all the inside information to get you ahead of the pack. Welcome to the microphone, Matthew Dickerson.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you very much. Digital chalk. I like the concept of digital chalk.
Yeah, it doesn't completely not messy at all. No dust.
No dust and no fingernails down the chalkboard either, which is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, I've been doing a bit of a setup for a client this week, and I started to wonder during that process whether or not we've become too specialised. We seem to get good
Too
at
specialised.
Yeah,
right.
we seem to get good at knowing knowing more and more about less and less. So we seem to really specialise on things. And in this particular scenario, what I was setting up was a simple FPOS terminal, so I'd be able to take credit card transactions.
Careful about how you use that word simple. Yeah, simple, right, okay.
Relatively simple.
I'm guessing
it
should be simple, but
right.
I'm gathering this is going to go down another.
It does seem too complicated. So you've got someone wants to be able to pay for a transaction with a credit card or a debit card.
Well, that should be simple.
That should be simple. So getting that for the actual merchant, the people who are taking the money, to be able to transact that, you want that to be simple as well because you want it to happen. Then you've got a point of sale program typically that you want to be able to have communicate, and you don't want the staff to type in the number because back in the old days when that used to be the case, I know one of my staff missed a zero one time, so a $2,000 purchase went out the door for $200. That's a lovely.
That's an expensive, an $1,800 loss there, right?
It's a lovely, generous staff member we've got there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, right.
So you've then got the FPOS terminal is typically not made by the bank; they're made by someone else. So then you get another company comes in to the middle to say, well, I'll make that and then, well, I don't want to go out there and deliver it and set it up. So we'll contract another company to do that.
Right.
But then you need some middleware, and I hate the term middleware because it does sound so nothingness. It's like my job is to sit in the middle and my left hand talks to one company, my right hand talks to another. But there are middleware companies out there. So then
it sounds like we've got a lot of chefs in this kitchen already.
That's exactly right. So this middleware software then sits between the FPOS terminal and the point of sale to then go back and actually transact with the bank. So by the time you get the hardware manufacturer, the hardware installer, the bank, the middleware provider, and the point of sale, what could possibly go wrong when you've got all those talking amongst each other?
There's got to be a couple of catch-22s in there as well where you can't have one before you've got the other and then the other won't operate before you've got the first one.
Well, that was part of the problem. Who do we get to set up the credentials to know that this transaction is occurring for this company? You talk to the bank, they go, oh, that's not us. No, that's the middleware provider that sets it up. You go to the middleware provider, they say, oh, we need permission from the bank to be able to create those credentials because we can't just create credentials for anyone.
Yeah.
So you do tend to go around in circles.
Just reminded me why I'm not going to set up a shop ever.
So it's a problem. I mean, I would love still for companies, and I get why they do it. I'd love for companies to say, we'll own that. We'll go through and take that whole process. But for example, the middleware company, they're pretty much the middleware company for every bank. So is it worth each bank creating their own middleware and making that work? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But so this is what I mean. That middleware company, they've specialised. They know a huge amount about that little tiny bit where a transaction goes from the FPOS machine through the point of sale out to the bank and then comes back in the other direction to say it's all okay. So we are more specialised, but you just need all those different parts talking together. And, of course, then when you try and talk to tech support, you go, am I going to wait for 3 hours on tech support for the wrong one? Which one do I ring? So it is a challenge. So trying to get someone to walk through that minefield is an issue, definitely.
Goodness me. Well, here we go with the headlines in today's episode. We're looking at the daily dilemma of separating from our smartphones. Now, there's a big problem. We've all got that issue with how much time on your phone is too much time. We're also going to be checking out a new breed of robots that are teaching themselves how to be more human. Don't get alarmed, folks. And we're asking the question, why are American cars just so ridiculously big? More of that later. Let's get rolling with our first story, brought to us by Uber. Now, carless households are becoming more and more common in urban and also now in suburban areas, which is for Uber both a blessing and a curse. More and more people are relying on rideshare services, which is great for business, but then fewer available drivers puts a real stretch on your resources. So the answer to that is for Uber to build a fleet of autonomous vehicles, I guess, Matt.
That is certainly one solution, and it does come down to a really interesting question. Do we think it's good value for money for us as normal, average, everyday people to own a car? Because when you think about it, you spend a lot of money. Most people, it's their second biggest purchase behind their house. So they own this car, which then sits in their garage most of the time. Oh, no, I've got to go to work. So you drive however long it takes. You might have a half-hour commute to work. You drive for half an hour. So you're using your car. And then you get to work and you sit it there. And it just sits there all day until that afternoon when you go, oh, I go home.
Sure does. Yeah, that's right.
The stats show that on average that people's cars, just as private consumer cars, are idle 95% of the time. Yet we spend collectively $78 billion in Australia on car ownership and operation. Average person spends about $40,000 when they buy a new car and about $10,000 a year in running that car. That would include loan repayments as well as the actual fuel and rego, etc. So $10,000 a year to own a car. So then Uber is really putting the challenge out to us saying, hey, if we get these autonomous vehicles going well, maybe just use us. Now, there's a little bit of vested interest there for Uber.
It certainly is, yeah.
But maybe use other ways of doing things rather than using a car. And my wife's recently discovered home delivery of groceries from major supermarkets. In the past, she never wanted to do it because it just seemed like you were almost being a bit lazy just to sit there and order it online. But she did it once when she was a bit snowed under and then went, oh, that was pretty easy, wasn't it?
That was so easy. And it worked.
And then the next time you go and order, you go, oh, there's my last order. Oh, actually, I do need that. I won't have that this time. So it's just there. That was easy again. Wow. I think she's doing the orders now quicker than it would take her to drive down to the supermarket. The whole thing's finished. And it comes, if you do it under a certain number of items, it comes within, say, 2 hours. So
and your car sits in the garage just that little bit longer.
That's exactly
Wishing
right.
it could be useful.
And so then you say, well, do I need that garage? If you're in a city with good enough public transport, you might say I don't need that vehicle. But when you start to think...
Well, in the city, you've also got to find a park.
Oh, that is a drama.
Yeah.
That is a
and
drama.
when you're sitting in traffic and you're watching the petrol gauge slide down because you're sitting in the traffic lights and traffic jams and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Uber that's nice is over a taxi is that you know how much that trip's going to cost before you get in. So you make a decision based on that. So at the moment it's going to cost me $18 to go with an Uber, or it's going to cost me $5 to catch a train, or I could walk, or whatever it might be. You can make those decisions. In a taxi, you're not really sure how much it's going to cost, so that's certainly one advantage. But it's certainly an interesting time where we just are going to start, I think, to redefine that. Now, when you think about Australia again, 15.1 million private cars we own in this country. There's more cars than that, obviously some are commercial vehicles, but there's 15.1 million privately owned cars. It's a lot of resources from the planet to build those cars.
Yeah.
Running those cars, you're not going to save much if you used other ways, but it does seem like a lot of energy, a lot of work done to build a car that sits in someone's garage for most of its life. So it's a different way. It's defining a whole range of different things. Oh, look, not that I give financial advice, but I probably wouldn't buy shares in a car company at the moment. I just wonder whether sales are going to slowly slide, worldwide sales, as more and more people go, you know what, I think there are better alternatives than just owning a car.
And so you've got these autonomous vehicles that are going to be driving us around when you dial up your Uber.
Well, and that's it. I think it'll be, I get my Uber and it's someone not in there driving. I mean, one thing you could do is...
Someone in there not there driving. There's someone else in this car and they're not driving. No, but yeah, you're essentially everyone's a passenger. So
everyone's a passenger, and you could get to the point where you could own a car if you really felt like you want to own a car, but then during the day it's being used by Uber in some autonomous way, maybe. Yeah, so you get to work, you park your car and go, I'll check in that I don't need my car till 5 o'clock this afternoon. I'm in the office all day, and off it goes and earns you some money during the day, and at 5 o'clock it's sitting there waiting for you to drive it home. Or maybe not drive it home, sit in the passenger seat and let Uber, the autonomous vehicle, drive you home. So changing landscape without a doubt.
All right, folks, time to be honest with ourselves here. Just how much have you become a slave to your smartphone? Have you had to take conscious steps to remove the distraction? I've taken to growing a virtual forest through an app, as an incentive to put the blasted thing down and get my chores done. There are a few nifty techniques that people employ to cut themselves off for a bit. But Matt, is there any research to suggest that these are worth anything in the long run?
Well, maybe-ish not. So is that a definite enough answer? There was a study done recently where they actually took a group, and it wasn't a big enough group in my mind. I would have liked to have seen a bigger group. They had 22 people. So
That's not a very big group.
No, it's not. But it's an indication, I suppose. And let's see if that leads somewhere else, somewhere with further information. They took a range of people aged 22 to 31, so people that are probably on their phones a lot, that sort of age group, some university students, some office workers in there, and they put them in a controlled environment. So not what you would have normally. In a normal workplace, you might have other employees, you might have colleagues that you just have a quick chat to, talk about the footy score on the weekend or a show coming up on the next weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So they put them in a controlled environment and they said, just work like you'd normally work and your phone's just there within reach. And they found on average, there was a certain amount of work they were meant to try and do, but they found on average the participants spent 23 minutes on their phone. So that's pretty good, I thought. It wasn't a lot for a 20-something. I thought that was pretty good. So then they did the same thing the next day, but this time they put their phone 1.5 metres away. So they had to actually get up to go to their phone. And that's an effort.
Yes, that's right.
It's an effort to get. I've got to get up out of my seat.
It's just at a quick reach and you can just quickly update yourself on Facebook or whatever.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So did that make any difference? Well, the answer is yes, but it's not as good as you think. It reduced the amount of time they spent on their phone to 16 minutes. So from 23 to 16 is fairly significant. Again, small sample space here, but they didn't achieve 7 minutes of extra productivity each day. They just distracted themselves in another way. So they ended up using social media on their computer instead of on their phone, so it didn't really achieve anything. Which then comes down to, do we give phones too hard a time? We all think we get distracted by them and it's annoying and I didn't get much work done because I just kept looking at notifications coming through. But if we go back to an era before phones, and we're old enough we can remember that, maybe some of our listeners aren't old enough to remember that time, did we just get distracted by something different? So is the phone the current distraction or is the phone the problem? And that, again, very small sample space there, but that would tend to suggest humans are the problem here, that we just need a little break every now and again. We need a little distraction. So maybe 30 years ago it was a newspaper. We just pick up and read a story. Or maybe it was a colleague. We go and say, hey, what's happening today? And not really anything to say, just going, what's happening, thinking of something to say. So
I know that I used to tidy my desk.
There you
You
go.
know, so it's supposed to be studying from HSC and I'd tidy my desk.
Yeah, and so maybe that was essential because you work away and then at some stage your brain said, I just need a little bit of time to put this in the right filing cabinet. James,
Yeah,
can you
that's
just
right.
give me a break? And you go,
There's no way
sure.
I can continue here until the filing drawer.
That's right.
The filing drawer is all tidied and alphabetized properly.
That's right, because it's overflowing at the moment. You're just shoving stuff in here. You expect me to remember all this for the exam tomorrow.
There's no way that you can possibly get any other work done until that filing drawer is done.
So then your option then was not to get on a phone. You tidy the desk and away you go.
Yep.
I mean, I think some of them...
Yeah, we definitely found distractions in the past.
Yeah, we have. And some of the issues now, though, with various apps, and in particular some of the gambling apps, I think their job is to get you distracted, but keep you distracted.
Yes.
So they're very good at doing that. So maybe the newspaper or tidying your desk wasn't designed by default to keep you distracted, but maybe some of the apps are now designed to keep you distracted. So maybe phones aren't as bad as we think. They probably certainly are a little bit bad, I think, still, but maybe not quite as bad.
I think you can watch too many reels.
Maybe. There's got a limit. There's 78.
There's definitely too many reels.
So there's the other thing that's happened, which is a new term I haven't heard of, which is called phubbing, Phubbing. Now, I haven't even heard my kids use this one on me yet, so it must be very modern. And that's snubbing someone in favour of your phone. So in other words, you're sitting in the office and there's a colleague beside you, which you should just catch up with. How'd you go? Hey, I heard your wife was sick. How's she going? No, you don't do that. Instead of just saying good day, you just put out your phone and you turn your back on that person and put out your phone and have a play.
Goodness
so there's a term for that.
It's
it must
a thing.
be happening enough. It's phubbing. And I actually think there's another thing that you can do. Sometimes when you go into a shop and you just see the people, you know they're doing nothing, but they just couldn't be bothered serving you. And I've seen people do it where they go, I can't get your service in here. So they pull out their phone and they ring the shop because they think they'll get better service by actually ringing. The person's got to answer the phone. Oh, how are you going? Oh, have you got any of these? Sure. Well, I'm standing in front of you. Do you reckon you could sell me one? Like, there's got to be another term for that as well, where people aren't getting distracted by the phone in that scenario. So anyway, fubbing, just slip fubbing into a conversation with people. Carefully you say it.
That's
they might be
your word
thinking,
for the day.
That's right.
Well, if disconnecting yourself from tech is your goal, then this next story is going to be no help at all. Quite the opposite, in fact, because Samsung wants you to be connected, always, even while you do the vacuuming. They've developed a vacuum cleaner that'll allow you to monitor incoming calls and text messages, no less. So, Matt, is this taking multitasking to a ridiculous level, or is this just potentially an excuse not to finish the household chores?
Well, I actually thought it was good to run onto that previous story where we think that we get some distractions from phones, and here's a case where some people say, I'm doing the vacuuming and it's actually not so bad. I put some music on, I just ignore the world and doing vacuuming and that's it.
Yep.
But now
I've got a message I've got to deal with.
That's right. So now Samsung, and this is part of this whole concept they've got where they want you to be in a smart home, which is fine. I love the idea of a smart home. You do different things, but they want all their appliances to be able to talk to you, to be able to communicate. And so the first, or not the first one, but one of the ones they've got, the latest ones they've got, is this cordless stick vacuum, which is a lovely vacuum, nice and powerful, 100 minutes of runtime. It's got a whole range of features you would like to see in a stick vacuum, but the ability to show you incoming calls and incoming text messages, you just can't get a break. Surely it's okay to just ignore the rest of the world for a little while, but no, you can't take the calls on it, but you can see the call on it, so you can rush over and pick up your phone, but most people would have their watch and they probably hear the phone message coming through their headphones anyway.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
You can still see the phone call coming in, you can see the text messages, but they've got others in the range. So they've got things like their smart fridges, their smart ovens, their smart vented combo washer dryer. So it's got a 7-inch touchscreen on that so that you can actually receive phone calls on the washer dryer. So I did wonder about what's that noise in the background?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm in the laundry right now.
And it's on a spin cycle, spinning at 10,000 reps per minute. What's that in the background? Surely you could either walk out of the laundry to take the call or you could just ignore it while you did it. So you've got smart fridges, smart ovens, you've got things like...
This feels like a case of we know we could do it, so we did. We didn't think anybody would actually need it, though.
You bought that? Really? Like, we just did it because we wanted to show off. So you've got things like weather updates, you've got cooking instructions. Oh, yeah, look, I kind of get that one.
Yeah, that makes
Cooking
sense.
instructions on your oven makes sense somehow there. Music apps on there. You can see and talk to someone at your front door from your washing machine. Where does it stop?
Yeah.
So you've got no hope of
Connectivity,
escaping, is the
that's
bottom line.
how we live these days.
Exactly.
Let's face it, Wikipedia has gotten us all out of trouble 1,000 times over in the last couple of decades. And it's solved 1,000 dinner table arguments a day. It's progressed countless school projects and saved us all mental torture while we're watching that show, with that guy who was famous for doing that thing, back in the 80s, that guy. The one agony for Wikipedia, though, is that it's not great for pictures. Of course, professional shots require license fees, but a squad of snap-happy volunteers have taken on the challenge to bring decent quality pictures to the website with the answers, Matt.
Well, actually, go back one step there. I think it's wrecked in a party's grade, James.
All right.
I just think sometimes I used to enjoy...
People just got the answer. It's
That's
not
right.
about finding the answer anymore. You've just got the answer.
That's
Let's
right. I
stop
used to
everything.
enjoy
I'm just going to Wikipedia.
the discussion, the debate, and you'd be trying to work out a problem or solve something, and
Yep.
you'd have all these different views at the table, which were based on their loose memory of something that happened.
Yeah.
And then later on, you'd find out what the real answer was. Oh, that guy, he was so smart at the table, he knew that answer, or we all had no idea.
Yep.
And you do that now, and so I'll just look it up. No, don't look it up. Let's continue the discussion. It's more interesting than just knowing the answer. So no one wants that person at the table who just sits there on their phone the whole time. Oh, no, 78. No, it was Jimmy. No. Let's have a discussion about it. So anyway, further to that, this is a problem I didn't actually know that was such a big problem. Obviously, as you said, Wikipedia being a free site and it doesn't want to pay for professional images, just has images that people upload. So the images, all the images on Wikipedia are either images that people that use themselves have contributed, so user-contributed pictures, or freely licensed or in the public domain. So if I work for ABC Photographics Worldwide Images, whatever it might be, then I need to get paid, or that company needs to get paid for me to be able to get paid. So Wikipedia, sorry, you can't have these photos, which everyone understands. Everyone knows the rules.
Yeah.
And I haven't thought that's been that big a problem. But apparently it has. And I think it's driven by celebrities a little bit, where they go, that's a ghastly photo of me. Don't you realise I had 3 chin jobs since that photo was taken? Why don't you update that with a proper photo? And of course, Wikipedia's answer would be, well, no one's contributed one, so bad luck. So maybe that person needs to go and contribute their own photo. But now, again, I love the idea of just the community getting in. So at this stage, only about 55 volunteer photographers are doing this, but that will grow very quickly.
And let's face it, it's Wikipedia, so it could be any one of our listeners.
Could be any one of our listeners. Could be 55 listeners today. It could be 5,500 tomorrow. It could be 55,000.
Right.
Who knows? So
all you've got to do is be prepared to contribute a photograph.
Correct.
To Wikipedia.
And what they're doing is they're saying, go out and just try and get some better quality photographs. Get some photos that...
Go and invade the space of celebrities.
Well, to a certain extent, yes, but also other things. I'm sure there are photos of various landmarks or photos of various things out there.
For sure.
A car. I've used it to look up different cars, and again, it's been okay. They haven't been professional studio shots, but walk into a showroom, take a photo of a new car and then upload it to Wikipedia for some site about that particular new car. They're even getting to the point now, so it's called WikiPortraits if you want to go and search for it. If they're working on, they haven't got it yet, but they're working on getting to the point to even get accreditation for events like, say, the Oscars or some major event where you say, hey, I'm working in inverted commas for WikiPortraits, and you get your pass to go in and be able to take photos backstage or take photos up close. So they're getting a bit serious about it all.
Yeah,
now, I don't know they've got accreditation for any of those events yet, but that's their aim.
It's the goal.
That's their goal. So I think that makes sense. And for those people out there that feel like they've had a great injustice caused to them because their photo isn't as glorified as maybe it should be, then maybe there's some hope for those people, or maybe they just go and send their own photos in might be the solution.
Yeah, either send your own photos in or start posing and stop being caught candidly.
That's right. No, none of this candid stuff. That's right. Yeah, so it's an interesting problem, but we're getting there in solving this problem. It sounds like a first world problem, but what the heck? Let's solve those as well.
In a world obsessed with acquiring the latest and greatest, in maximising the firepower that's just at your fingertips, a new movement is emerging from left field. It's the low-tech movement that steps back from all the fancy apps and the mumbo-jumbo from AI. Low-tech is not quite Amish, but it accepts the need to remain connected, not a pinch more. And the Light Phone 3 is the tool of choice for the modern-day hippie, Matt.
I'm lucky you've gone straight to the Amish there. This might be the Amish phone, you think? I like it. So, it's interesting. I actually do some poetry for some aged care facilities. I go and do some poetry recitals every couple of months for them. And one of the most popular poems I do was one that I wrote, which talks about, it's called Tomorrow's Smartphone User, but it talks about the fact that phones are so complicated, sometimes you just forget to be able to make a phone call, and it's done in a much cleverer way over a 3-minute poem. Now, I won't go through the whole poem, but that's the whole concept, where really sometimes people use their phone with so many different things. Can it make a phone call anymore?
Yeah.
And of course the answer is yes, but that's something that I'm sure my kids don't understand, because they will send messages via 17 different apps, but if you ring them, they'll never answer the phone. Hello, kids out there, answer the phone for your dad.
They just stare at it vibrating and ringing on the desktop and going, what the hell's that?
Yeah, that's right.
It's doing it again.
That's the premise of my whole poem, is that someone gets confused about a phone call. They don't know what's going on with the phone call. So this concept here isn't bad either. So this is called the Light Phone 3. I must admit, I prefer it to be a little bit cheaper. It's about $900 Australian dollars. So
yeah, that seems like a lot for something that just makes phone calls and
it does.
basic text messages.
And they really focused on a market that says, if you want a phone that isn't a complicated smartphone, this is the phone for you. But to me, if you're going to cut out all those features, you probably should cut the price down a bit more than $900. But
the only problem with that, I think, is that if it's more expensive, people give it value. And if it's less expensive, people don't value it at all.
possibly. They might think it's not really worth much if I only have to pay $100 for it. So
Hmm.
anyway, they've gone for a black and white OLED display. So that seems pretty backwards straight away. Black and white,
Black
really?
and white?
Yeah, that's
Can
right.
we do that still?
Yeah, well, apparently you can. And the size is about, say, the same sort of size as an iPhone in terms of width. A bit shorter, though. So you want to be able to use one hand for any texting, which is good. So that makes it a bit easier for you. No social media on there. That's fantastic.
Okay. Yeah.
No internet browser. So you can't be that person sitting at the dinner table and going, I'll just look up the answer on Wikipedia. No email there. Very much minimalistic. Make phone calls. Still send messages, text messages. And you've got a few basic things. You've got a calendar on there. You've got a flashlight, music player, podcast player. So just the basics on there. And it's still got a decent camera. It's got a 50 megapixel camera and 128 gigs of memory. So it's designed...
So the camera only takes black and white photos.
But that's what I was wondering as well. I thought, yeah, that's a great photo I've taken, I think, because I can't really see it in anything else but mono. So presumably when you upload it somewhere, you can look at it in a better quality. But 128 gigs of RAM, or storage, is more than enough, I think, for most of the photos, especially if they're in black and white. But most of the photos that you want to take, for most people, that's really going to cover 90%. If you took away social media, 90% of what they do with their phones. Some phone calls, a few photos, maybe some text messages, and that's about it. It's still got an NFC chip, so you can still do contactless payment, so that's convenient. I actually saw this, it seems like a solution for the minimalist, but I actually see this as a really good solution for kids, their first phones. Because I've had a few discussions. In fact, I was only chatting to my nephew the other day with his parents, and he was saying, I need a phone now. And he's in year 5.
Yeah.
And my general view, this isn't hard and fast, but I generally see parents getting phones for the kids, maybe about high school, getting into high school, seems to be about the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids with phones, like early primary school even.
Well,
and kids now see phones as something that they can watch YouTube on, or play games on, or whatever, and they grab mum or dad's phone because.
Yep, and primary school, again, I'm not making any comments on any parenting abilities for myself or anyone else out there, but primary school seems a bit early. Having said that, my kids, because I do have a mobile phone business, my kids end up with phones in primary school, but I do wonder whether that's just a reflection on me as a bad parent, but whether that's a bit early. But I suppose back when my kids got phones, it was a good old-fashioned flip phone. They could make phone calls and text messages.
Yeah.
But giving someone now a smartphone, if they're in year 5,
power there.
Oh, it's scary. And we know some of the poor consequences that happen sometimes when people engage in social media when they're not mature enough yet to actually handle some of the things that are there. So I saw this as a really good phone for kids, maybe it's their first phone. Here you go, you got a phone, you can text mum and dad, you can text your friend, you can say, come and pick me up after soccer training. That's all there. But you want to get on social media? Sorry, you can't do that. Or if you really want a social media account, sure, do that at home on a computer where mum and dad can see what you're doing rather than on a phone on a bus where there's no one around just to monitor what you're doing. So I don't mind that concept. One thing that's interesting about it is it's got a user replaceable battery. That's going back to the old days. So your battery can go flat and you can pop another battery in. So I don't know why they've gone that way, but there must be a reason for it. But we just get so used to phones now being completely sealed units. Maybe they're kind of working on the whole idea that you can replace the battery rather than charge it up so that it's basically here. You haven't got the excuse that your phone's gone flat now, or you can give the phone to mum and dad overnight.
Spare batteries, you
can swap them over. That was one thing. But funnily enough, I did see some people talking about this phone saying it's great for a digital detox. And I kind of questioned that a bit. You mean here's some technology to give you a digital detox?
I can see what they mean because it's social media detox, really.
You're probably right. It's a social media detox rather than a digital detox. But if you want a digital detox, then just put the phone in the cupboard. But whatever phone it is.
Go Amish. Grow the beard, put the barn up.
The long-term solution.
Get serious about it.
Go digital detox for a day here. I'm just building a barn. Anyway, Light Phone 3, it's a fascinating concept. I don't know what their sales are like, but it's out there as a solution for someone.
Now, I don't know if you've seen it, but the humanoid robot named Figure 2.0 looks like it might have stepped straight out of the 2004 classic film I, Robot. And the news that will not make skeptics very happy out there is that Figure 2.0 has had an upgrade. It's called reinforcement learning, and Figure 2.0 is now teaching itself how to behave more like a human. teaching itself to be more like a human is nothing to worry about now, is it, Matt?
Surely that's all okay as the robots take over the world. Now, I learned something new in this story when I was doing the research for this. Moravec's paradox. Moravec and some other researchers came up with this paradox that basically said that tasks that humans find easy, like walking, for example, recognising faces, driving cars, we've talked about that a lot, that we seem to be able to handle doing that sort of thing, even catching a ball, some of those things are extremely difficult for robots to replicate, yet some things that seem incredibly complicated, so playing chess or solving complicated equations, are very easy for machines. So it seems like this paradox that, hold on, that can be really easily done by a human. Surely a robot could do it. No, they can't. And then vice versa, that's a really complicated equation on computers. You humans, you've got no idea. I can do that standing on my head, literally. So it's a paradox that's been coined in relation to this whole movement of robotics going forward, where we are spending an incredible amount of time trying to make a robot drive a car. When we get our 16-year-olds in behind the driver's wheel or in the seat behind the driver's wheel, then within hours, maybe not hours, maybe 10 or 20 hours, they're at least able to drive. I wouldn't say they're completely competent by that stage, but they're at least able to drive a vehicle.
A bit of an idea.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And we're talking millions of hours of research are being done by various companies around the world to get some type of machine to drive a car, but no, we can do it. We're okay. So it's quite fascinating. But in this scenario, what they've done is they've said, if you can walk more like a human, you'll be more trusted. And that's one of the things apparently with robots is that when we see them walking not human-like, we see their gait not quite right, we see them walking with very robotic movements, we feel a bit intimidated or scared by this particular device. If we can get them to walk more like us, we'll go, oh yeah, they're cool. That's no problem. We have more trust in ChatGPT or various AI when we understand the language sounds like us or we hear it talk a bit like us. If it's very robotic, we think something's scary going on here. But this whole concept of learning by watching and then learning again is accelerating this learning process. So watch a human, replicate that, and they're essentially giving the robots rewards in some form for getting things right. So it's almost like they're gamifying the learning experience. So that sounds fascinating as well. So they're doing all of these things where they're doing thousands of digital robots training simultaneously to learn as a collective and then get to the point where they can walk on uneven terrain, they can handle being shoved or tripped, do things that would happen in a normal environment and be able to do it. So when we get to the stage then when you can do some sort of dance off, I don't know what we're going to do when someone says, hey, your go-to is a robot dance. Well, if robots look just like us.
Last week, didn't we? Yes.
That's right. Then we're in trouble. So BMW is looking at testing these robots in the manufacturing plant. They want to use them in logistics, parts handling. And so if you're on the assembly floor, you're just looking at robots walking around and that feels okay. Or if you see them being very stiff and very robot-like, you all get out of the road of the robot because they're a bit scary. So it's actually interesting. And I thought about one of the other ones I read recently was Google DeepMind. They've been working on doing something as complicated as tying a shoelace. They've just about got to the point where it can tie a shoelace reliably every single time. Now, we all teach our kids to try and tie a shoelace before they go to kindergarten. So if your shoelace comes undone at school, then you can handle tying it up yourself. So if a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old can tie a shoelace, wow, surely robots should be able to. But that's taken a big challenge to get there. So anyway, they might be good alternatives for human labour in hazardous or high fatigue roles. But it's happening, James. The day when I'll have the clothes picked up from my floor, it's happening. It's happening. Right. It's getting there.
Yes, you'll have your own personal robot to serve you through the house.
Absolutely. I can hardly wait.
Now, communicating between submarines is a tricky business. Though having learned a lesson or two from humpback whales, it's not impossible. And up until now, anyone on the surface has been none the wiser. A development out of Princeton University and MIT, though, it shows not only now allows airborne drones to listen in on messages transmitted below the waves, Matt.
And I do wonder whether this research is done because we are worried about surveillance or whether it's just cool. Let's see if we can do this and work out this concept. Now, when you talk about some sort of communication under the water, then typically you're talking about very low frequency VLF in terms of the transmission of those.
But it's just vibrations in the water, isn't it? that we're
Effectively,
talking about?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And you're talking about signals, talking about electromagnetic signals being generated, which creates vibrations in the water. But when you do that, we all know that our trees, for example, full of water, or any water we've got around with our mobile phone communications is soaked up very quickly because those high frequencies are absorbed really well by water. And I often use a Bluetooth headset when I go swimming, and I put the phone near the pool, just beside the pool, on a little chair, and even if I just go underwater a bit too long, it just drops out completely until I come back up close to the surface.
Yeah,
so
right.
it doesn't take much water to
Yeah.
block and Bluetooth is very low power as well, but even the mobile phone signal, being higher power but high frequency, is blocked very effectively. So those low frequencies are used in things like submarines, and in the past, how would you possibly have listened in on that? Because most of that signal is being absorbed as it transmits through the water. It's not going to come to the surface and come out of the surface the same as a normal radio signal that will be transmitted in air.
Now, we've got to be talking, and like, I did a bit of research on this one, but it's really between submarines that we're talking about here, aren't we? Yeah?
Back to a base, maybe, from a submarine to
From
a base.
submarine to a base, yeah.
But submarine to submarine, that type of thing.
Yeah,
So
submarine to some sort of receiver that's underwater, perhaps.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. So getting signals to submarines in wartime, for example, that's obviously important so they know what's going on.
Also talking to whales.
That's right, obviously. That goes without saying, James. So what these researchers did was they said, we think there's going to be some vibrations on the surface of the water. Can we pick up those vibrations and work out what's
And then
being
decode
spoken about?
them.
That's
I think
right.
This is amazing.
Fascinating, because I started thinking about the ocean. And the ocean looks, whenever I've been out on the ocean, not that I've been floating around, but out on a ship in the ocean, a cruise ship, the ocean looks like it's pretty uneven. It doesn't look like it's a beautiful...
Very rarely is it glass.
That's right. It's not like my swimming pool. It's not sitting there with a perfectly flat surface and then you would detect a little vibration. But that's what they've been able to manage to do with radar and drones, just normal drones, hovering over the water. You've probably got a bit of an idea where the submarine might be. It's not going to pick it up from 500 kilometres away. But if you get near where that submarine is and it's communicating, then presumably there's enough vibration on the water. Now, they did some testing in things like a lake where it was probably a better surface than the ocean. They could pick it up. They did testing in the ocean. They got to the point where they could pick up the modulation about 97.58% accurately.
Wow.
Accuracy. So pretty close to getting it spot on the whole time. So that was pretty impressive. So then what they suggested in this is, well, here are some ways that you could stop people eavesdropping. So it's almost like they've solved the problem, then created another problem in the whole process themselves. Yeah. So all of this is relying on just these tiny surface vibrations, and that includes getting wind and waves there and still be able to detect this. I can't see any practical use for this apart from in wartime. Things that are developed for wartime, I kind of go, oh, well, they could use that in this other really sensible way. But this one, I just can't see anything unless you're spying on your neighbours.
Yeah, just spying on the spies.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
submarines
it.
lurking around in your waters and you want to know what's happened with them?
I'd like to think there's some better use for it, but I can't think of one. It's just, it seems to be, it's all about just basically, maybe, I'm trying to think as I speak, maybe a transponder for a jetliner that goes down. Maybe
well, if we start building
signals.
cities under the ocean, maybe it's got a purpose then.
Maybe, so they can get to the outside world. That'd be the only reason I wouldn't move underwater, if I couldn't get decent internet, if the Wi-Fi didn't work very well down there. So it's fascinating what they've done with the research, and I don't know what inspired the research, but quite fascinating what they've done.
What is it with Americans and their humongous cars? While the rest of the world is producing vehicles with a view towards energy efficiency, everything about the American car market seems to be going in the opposite direction. Matt, this isn't a new thing. There have been Cadillacs and Dodge pickup trucks taking up two car parks at the shops forever. But if anything, it's like they're getting bigger and bigger.
It's not like they're getting bigger and bigger. The data shows
They are literally getting bigger and bigger,
they
folks.
are. In the last 15 years, the average vehicle footprint for the US has risen by 6%, which doesn't seem like a huge number, but when you consider they're already big, they were bigger than average cars.
But everyone else is trying to downsize.
They are. They're getting sensible. They're saying, do I really need this car that's this huge tank, which some of them look like, to be able to travel for me individually to work at 20 kilometres an hour in a traffic jam? Is it really that necessary? I always chuckle to myself when I see something like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini in Sydney traffic, and I go, wow, that's a lovely car, it can go really fast, but it's sitting there at 20 k's an hour or stopped at traffic lights.
I'm beating it in this queue.
That's right, yeah. I was lucky in this lane and I'm in front of that, but wow, I'm glad you've spent all that money on that vehicle. So the other part that's interesting is that they've increased, so that was over 15 years, 6%. They've increased over the last 10 years in length by 12% and width by 17%. I'm sure, and I know this for some vehicles, and I won't say brand names here, but I know one vehicle is at the maximum limit that they're allowed to have a vehicle in Australia. Surely by the time you're getting to increasing width by 17%, you're staying at the stage where you're getting close for a lot of those cars to the maximum allowable width. And the parking is an issue, even though I've seen vehicles that I know.
Absolutely an issue, yeah.
I know are within the length constraints of our laws in Australia, but you see them parked and you go, you've got to, as you're driving along the street, move over a little bit for that car that's sticking out so far, even though it's legal, just seems like it's too big. What they've looked at in all the research of this is why are Americans obsessed with big vehicles? And it does come down to economics. Petrol prices typically have been so much cheaper in the US over decades that Americans haven't seen the need to go to smaller vehicles. The rest of the world has said, wow, petrol's so expensive. How can we get a smaller vehicle? Smaller vehicle logically is going to need less power to move that mass around. Therefore, it's going to use less fuel. That all makes sense.
And there's status with a big car.
There does seem to be, doesn't there? There does seem to be this thing that I'm a big, important person, so I have a big, important car. Obviously, it goes without saying. But if you look at petrol prices, this is at the end of last year, the US on average was about, these are all in Aussie dollars, about $1.55 per litre. Compare that to the UK, petrol was about $2.80 per litre. $2.80. Singapore, $3.06, and Hong Kong, $4.87.
Per litre.
Per litre, $4.87.
Goodness me.
And there is, to me, a huge variation there. So if I'm living in Hong Kong, I don't really want to drive a big petrol guzzler. It just seems like I'm just taking my wages and giving it to the oil companies. Here, why don't I just do a direct deposit to you and just feed it all straight to you? Can I have a little bit of money to eat this week, please? The biggest selling vehicle in America is, of course, the Ford F-150, the large pickup truck. And I know they call them trucks. We call them utes here. But with the F-150, I think it's fair enough it's called a truck because it looks like a truck. It looks like a big vehicle.
Certainly big enough.
It is big enough. So are they going to change any of that? Is any of this going to change? I don't know. I think there is this perception as well that you've got a bigger car, that you're safer. I always kind of feel like in a small modern technology car, it's probably got better avoidance. I can avoid something. If I'm in a crash, sure, I might be at greater risk because there's greater mass with that larger vehicle. So maybe it's got that extra mass on its side or it's got bigger crumple zones. But I reckon I've a better chance in a small modern vehicle to avoid that crash in the first place because it's more agile, more nimble. I can brake with my ABS and still corner or turn. So maybe I'm going to avoid the accident in the first place. But I did say to someone who had a big car one day, it was a big car and they were giving, wasn't my car, I was giving this person a hard time about their Volvo. And I said, well, why don't you just go back 100 metres, have a head-on collision and see who comes out of it okay? Because Volvo's had a reputation of being very safe.
That's right.
They didn't take me up on the offer, so not surprisingly.
But yeah, I mean, it's safety, but there's a cost for that because the person that you run into, you've got a lot more inertia, haven't you, as this big tank of a car?
Yeah, that's right.
And so, yeah, okay, I'll be fine, but the person I hit is going to be mincemeat.
You've touched on the fact that people are selfish, James, so they'll go, I'm okay, I had the big car, who cares about the other guy in the little car who's doing the right thing by the environment? The average horsepower was another one that was interesting, I thought. From 1990 to 2024, the average horsepower for these vehicles has gone from 143 horsepower, apologies, I'm using imperial terms here, 143 horsepower to 325 horsepower.
How many swimming pools is that?
Yeah, at least 3. So,
right, okay.
So that's more than doubled its horsepower in that time frame. And so you need extra horsepower to drive that bigger vehicle. And look, engines are getting better as well, so that makes sense in some respects. But it does seem to be that you're just getting to the point where you've got to have an SUV. In fact, 60% of all new vehicle sales in the US now are SUVs. So we had a station wagon when I was growing up. A station wagon seemed quite adequate for putting myself, one of the kids in our family in, and some luggage in the back, and that seemed to make sense. My dad used to train greyhounds, so he had a little spot there. We put a little cage up and put the greyhounds in the back of the station wagon.
Yeah,
so
right.
it seemed to do whatever we needed to do, but now you couldn't. Do they even make station wagons? I haven't seen a station wagon for a long time. Does anyone know what I'm talking about out there with the station wagon?
They've gone to the same place that panel vans have gone.
Yeah, panel vans, they were a classic. The whole trend now seems to be SUVs. But again, they're bigger. They're bigger than a sedan, so you feel like you're safer or something. I'm not sure. But it's a bit of a worrying trend because we need everyone across the world to contribute to reducing emissions, not just a few countries, not countries where the petrol's a bit dearer. We want Americans, even though it's cheap petrol, to contribute as well.
Now, we're all about health and fitness here at Tech Talk. For most smartwatches these days, measuring the heart rate is pretty much a standard. But how often do you get to check in on your heart rate? Well, we're here to introduce you to the concept of heart rate variability, or HRV for short. So, Matt, why is this new thing something that I've got to keep my eye on?
Well, I'm actually convinced with all the extra technology we've got now with wearables that I'm not an elite athlete, James. It's finally come to me. It's dawned in my mind.
And are you telling me that it's because you've been checking your heart rate?
Yeah, I've checked some of my stats and I compare that to elite athletes and they're not the same. They're
not the same.
They're not even in the ballpark, James. So all these things, all these years I've been thinking at one
too early
stage.
to give up.
You reckon? Okay,
Yeah.
I'll keep working then. So we've got a whole bunch of different bits of data, stats now. And back in the day, you would go to the Australian Elite Institute of Sport as an elite athlete, which I wasn't and I didn't go there. And you'd go there and they'd hook up a bunch of machines that at least went beep once or twice, and they'd give you a bunch of data about you and then show you how to improve that. And one of the ones that they used to, or they still do, I'm sure, is the heart rate variability. So if you've got high variability, that's a good thing, which I found surprising because you'd think you'd want your heart to be consistent. But if you've trained correctly, so if you've trained as an elite athlete, your body is ready to respond quicker, so you'll actually have more variability in your heart rate. Now, all of this would be completely irrelevant to most of us on a day-to-day basis unless we happen to be an elite athlete at some institute of sport. But now, with our smartwatches, it's almost like they're scratching around trying to find other things to come up with to give us information on. And this is the latest one. So you can check your heart rate variability. So I checked mine, James. I thought I'll just see if maybe I did miss my calling and I should retire from Tech Talk and go and be an elite athlete.
And so you want to see how quickly you can get to your maximum heart rate and then how quickly you can return to a resting heart rate.
Well,
Is
not
that
so
what
much.
we're talking about?
No.
Not
this,
even that?
This is actually how many milliseconds
Oh, right.
between your beats, but how much that varies. So in other words, when you're doing a consistent heart rate, so whether you're sitting there doing nothing or you're exercising,
Right.
and there's a heartbeat there, how much is that variable? Now, I would have
This
thought...
is next level.
It is. I would have thought being consistent would be good, but no, apparently
no.
if you've got higher variability, then that means your body is ready to respond quicker. So when you need to put that effort in, your body jumps to it, whereas if you've got a low variability, then it's not as ready to jump into that mode. So I checked mine. I looked at elite athletes, typically maybe 150 plus milliseconds this is. And I looked at mine and I'm only about 50. So
Oh, you got some work to do.
yeah, that's right. I'm about the third. At least it's not in the danger zone. You get down to maybe 20 or 30. That's when you've probably got some issues that you just haven't got any variability at all. So
Yeah,
you might
okay.
need to do a bit of exercise. So I'm okay that I'm up around 50 for me, but the elite athletes are up around that 150.
Yeah, well, 50 is a lot closer to 20 or 30 than it is to 150.
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, thanks. So I'm closer.
I refuse to get measured on my heart rate variability having had this conversation.
Right, good on you. Well, if you just ignore it, it doesn't matter.
That's
apparently.
right. Yep. If you don't get tested, then it's not a problem.
So what they do with elite athletes is they do check their heart rate variability, and that's one of the ways, and maybe this is my problem, one of the ways they work out if they're overtraining. If their heart rate variability starts to drop a bit, that means they're training too hard and their body's fatigued, so it's not able to respond. So maybe that's my issue. Maybe I need to stop training and see if I can get my heart rate variability up. So I'll keep that in mind. But they found other things, for example. So if you get good quality sleep, if you're well hydrated, you've got a good diet, and you're getting consistency in your sleep and wake times, your heart rate variability is actually higher. When you do things like drink too much alcohol, you've been sick, been stressed, or disrupted sleep, that's when your heart rate variability starts to go down. So they use all these factors in training elite athletes. But this is the thing now, James. We've got access to so much information. As average everyday punters, we can look at all this data and go, wow, I'm not an elite athlete. But
there's no reason why I shouldn't be.
That's right. I've got the tools now. It used to be just those ones that were selected that got to go to the institutes of sport.
That's right.
They were the ones because they had all the trainers and all the information around them. We've got that
anyone
now.
with the right watch.
That's right. It's fascinating, isn't it? But I do feel like sometimes they're just going, what else can we do? What other things can we look at?
Yeah, that's right.
Does it matter? I don't know, but let's put it in there and give them another thing to look at.
Well, it's exciting because they're going to keep coming up with new things, new little things to give their athletes the edge.
We'll give athletes the edge. That means you and I the edge too, James.
Yes, that's right.
That's what it's all about.
And that's all we have time for today. Matt, you've got to get back to the vacuuming, but thanks for some cracking tech talk there.
Well, I'm actually really impressed with myself. We've done about, 49 minutes, and I haven't gone to check my phone. I've stayed away from the distraction of my phone. So maybe people just need to sit there and engage conversation. That might be the solution to distractions from their phone. So I'm holding off. I want to pick it up now, but I want to wait till the very end.
Oh, we've got more chatting to have before we get onto that, though. I'm off to teach myself some new stuff and hopefully stay a step ahead of those humanoid robots. Thanks for tuning in once again, folks. You've been listening to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson, the only Tech Talk with real Matthew Dickerson, so you know it's good for you. I'm your host, James Eddy, tongue-tied and got to put his false teeth back in, and I'm wishing you a safe and productive week ahead. I'm having a shocker. We hope to catch you again in another 7 days' time. Until then, take care, and we'll see you when we see you.